This man is an airline pilot. He lives about 10 miles from Idlewild, and he drives to his work. Now, you might think this is pretty dangerous work, and some recent newspaper headlines might lead you to guess that this man is insurable at a rather high premium. But, according to the insurance companies, the most dangerous part of his journey is already over. It says here, breakfast in Karachi, lunch in London, supper in San Francisco, and sometimes we have to add luggage in Rome. Today we're going to look into the crowded sky and consider air safety. Now, it's an odd thing about the human mind that it seems to be so constituted that when you say the phrase air safety, most people think of its opposite, air disaster. Every time a plane crashes in Tibet or Kansas, we are grateful that we were not aboard. And yet, when 450 people are killed on a holiday weekend on the highways, we don't say, it might have been me. Every day, 500,000 people get off the ground, take to planes, and fly in all sorts of weather and all sorts of landscapes, and come safely to their destinations. How safe is air travel? Well, the insurance companies, who employ experts to figure risks, they put it in a rather vivid way. It does not cost an airline pilot 1 penny more to buy a life insurance policy than it costs a librarian or a grocer. Now, the point of all this is simply that statistically, aviation is one of the safest forms of transport. But it's not safe enough, and in some countries it's a very big issue. And, as you will soon see, it is of special concern to the United Nations. Civil aviation started after the First World War. The first airliners were converted bombers of the 1918 vintage, and the first airline passengers were people moved by urgency or bravado. The machines of that period were creaky and underpowered, and the pilots were, by today's standards, deaf and blind. Flying was a daytime, fair-weather sport, sometimes a desperate expedient. Things are now quite different. For years, airliners have been flying at night in weather both fair and foul, and pilots have been able to supplement their physical senses with all sorts of new devices. Flying is busier, more complex, faster, more important and necessary than ever before. Let's have some. The flight which follows is typical of today's international airline procedure. Because Idlewild has the greatest traffic density of any airport in the world, we shall focus the traffic problem by showing both a takeoff and a landing at the same airport, Idlewild. Now we're going to break the law of gravity. The shape of this plane and the power of its engines is going to help us to overcome gravity by lift and to defeat drag by thrust. And up front there are some very skilled men who are going to see that this goes according to plan.
Checklist.
Roger. Ready for checklist?
Ready for checklist.
Wheels.
Block safety.
Landing gear lever down.
Down.
Cockpit cabin oxygen pressure.
Check.
Equipment cooling control.
Automatic.
Oxygen panels and mask.
Check.
Circuit breakers.
All checked and in.
Warning system lights.
Check.
Flow meter power.
Normal.
Battery and DC power.
Check battery on.
Electrical panel.
Check then set.
Fuel quantity and distribution.
Distribution normal quantity 37,000.
Fuel panel.
Check then set.
Fuel flow meters.
Reset.
Hydraulic fluid.
Full.
Engine start pressure.
3,000 in each bottle.
Air conditioning and pressurization.
Panel set.
Fuel done.
Complicated?
Engine oil quantity.
Technical, of course.
Gross weight and
But every complicated piece of equipment or procedure consists of a great number of essentially simple things. Things that any of us can understand.
off. Anti-skid.
Off.
Spoiler switches.
On.
Passenger oxygen valve.
Normal.
No smoking seat belt sign. On. Emergency exit light. Armed. Fuel inlet heat. Off. Rudder and aileron trim.
Neutral.
Roger. Stop checklist complete.
At the airport terminal, other men are busy making sure that our flight goes well. The flight plan has been filed and approved, which means that a highway has been set aside for us in the sky.
Right. Ask for taxi clearance, please.
Roger. Idlewild ground, this is Air India Jet 108. Request taxi clearance, please.
Air India 108 Idlewild ground via the outer perimeter, right turn taxiway hotel, taxi to hold short 31 left, wind northwest 10, the altimeter 2973, time 1641. Over.
Air India Jet 108, roger. Taxiing now. Taxiing.
Rogers are ready. Clear my side.
Roger.
Taxi up to, but hold short of runway 13 left, traffic lane.
Air India 108, clearance. ATC clears Air India 108. By the Idlewild Southwest radio beacon, that's the Idlewild 120 radial to Hampton 252 radial to Hampton. Victor 46 South, Nantucket flight plan route.
Now, the men in the control tower and the men up front are combining their concentration and considerable technical skill to the problem of getting us off the ground. Now, there are several other things that we need to ensure a safe flight. We have to have first, obviously, a well-built, well-designed plane. We have to have airports with long, strong enough runways accurately sighted. We have to have an air traffic system that can separate planes both laterally and vertically. We have to know a good deal about the weather all along the route. Preferably, we should be in continuous contact with the ground, for which we have to have all kinds of navigational equipment, beacons, charts, and so on. We have to have enough of all these things. Now, whenever you read in a newspaper that there's been an air disaster, one of these things, much more likely a combination, a rather freakish combination of these things, has gone wrong. They don't often go wrong. Last year, the airways of the world managed 108 million separate, safe flights, like the one we're on.
Rudder boost checked. 3 my side.
3 my side.
Roger. Power check. Takeoff checklist complete.
Okay. Idlewild Tower, Air India Jet 108. Permission to take off, please. Over.
Air India 108 Idlewild Tower, clear for takeoff, 31 left.
Okay, rolling.
Rogers are ready.
Check minimum power, please.
Roger, will do.
Air India 108 rolling.
V1. Rotate.
Gear up.
Gear going up.
Air India 108, contact departure control now 121.1.
Okay, tracking on 120 radio.
Roger.
Thank you. Now, at this point, you may well wonder what the United Nations is doing getting into civil aviation. Well, let's put it this way. At this moment, all around the world, thousands of people are taking off from the ground on which for millions of years they've learned to live on. Now, in Europe and the Middle East and Asia and Africa, the air traffic density is getting worse every month. And on those continents, remember, they have many frontiers, which in the United States we do not have, so that when you fly across Europe, you cross a frontier, seconds divide one language from another, one system of law from another, one culture from that of its neighbor. Now, who's going to call the turn? What language should the pilot speak? What landing instructions should be obeyed by a pilot of one country who's making an emergency landing in another? To bring some sense and order into this traffic jam of the world's airways, the nations decided that they had better get together and establish a world order. And that's why the United Nations is getting into it. And that's why just now we are going over to Montreal. Montreal, Canada, is the headquarters of the International Civil Aviation Organization of the United Nations, a member of the UN family, a specialized agency as it's called. The Secretary General of ICAO is a Canadian, Mr. Ronald McDonald.
Pilots and controllers, navigators and radar operators must today be able to speak the same language in more senses than one. They must be able to understand each other, whatever the nationality or the mother tongue. What's more, they must agree on how things are to be done. The business of reaching that agreement is our problem here at the International Civil Aviation Organization, ICAO for short. You've heard about some of the services required to get a plane up in the air, to keep it up there safely, and to bring it down safely at its destination. When it comes to international flying, every one of these services is our concern. How an airliner is designed and built, how strong a runway must be, the kinds of people who operate aircraft, their training and their licensing, air traffic coordination, the navigator's tools and maps, and so on. You may well ask, what do we at ICAO do about all these things? We operate no radars, we fly no planes, we man no airports. But in our meeting rooms and around our tables, there assemble the civil aviation administrators and experts from most of the world. Together, they work out and agree on the minimum international standards, the essential hard core of safety, which then forms the practical basis for international flying by all nations. Flight safety is an international problem. Never have the air lanes been so crowded with such large, fast, internationally moving objects, and the pace is steadily increasing. This problem could only be approached in an international way, and it has been.
So you see, the main problem of air safety is separating air traffic, just keeping planes apart, because remember, a plane is not assigned a position behind another plane on a highway like an automobile. It must have a clear highway all the way to its destination. And with 3 or 4 planes going from point A to point B, this is easy. Common sense takes over. You fly left of this line, I fly to the right. You stay above 10,000 feet, I'll stay below. That's what happens in the country at large. Desert airstrips and rural places, so on. But the aching problem of civil aviation today is the metropolis, with its hundreds of planes landing and leaving. When you approach a metropolis, the sky is no longer as wide as the horizon. It begins to contract into a rather cramped mesh of highways, crossing, intersecting, running parallel, running opposite to each other. Then what happens? Well, sometimes this.
Hey, look, I'm considering the Navy out of the way.
Put the headset up.
Your guys got to cross Greentown at their altitudes because I'm using half the altitudes in here at
Transworld 353.
You got to cross Greentown at their
You can
altitudes.
go to 17, all right?
Him here? Why 17?
Because the guy off Newark, Victor.
What's he going? I'm going to 15 only.
What altitude do you want? Give me an altitude.
Look at those strips. Give it up to 17.
Up to 17, okay.
This is New York Control Center at one of the busiest hours of the day, late afternoon. Essentially, what these men are doing is the simple but always tricky job of keeping aircraft out of each other's way.
Get the radio immediately. Okay.
Where's American 5?
American 5 is out of the way.
Okay. And Northwest?
Oh, this guy's.
Oh, here's Northwest back here, here's 427 back here.
6,000.
I don't know, Manny. I doubt it. I don't think he's out of the way.
Oh, wait a minute.
He's out in route.
25 to him.
15?
Right.
Level 237, radar
American
service,
15, climb to and maintain flight level
250.
And 863 to 26. You're allowed climbing.
American 348, New York Center and radar contact.
To and maintain flight level 260.
Turn, maintain your present heading until 30 seconds, then turn left to 305, 305. American 365, roger, report
turn
reaching
right, heading
030,
030, tune in the Poughkeepsie VOR, advise when you're ready, fella. 44 Bravo, roger. Now this American is going to be shooting up your way.
Okay, bring him across here.
All right.
United 603, turn left immediately, heading 240 for 3 minutes. You're overtaking an American Convair, maintaining 12,000.
In radar.
Oh, they will
contact
fire
their
us.
opposite, over. And at 86.
Hey, Joe. Saturation to the west, no more altitudes available.
Saturation point?
That's correct.
Radar is the clue to sorting out these situations and giving the controllers the information on which they can base their decisions. But the radar equipment in use in civil aviation today is blind in one important respect. It does not measure height. An air controller generally has a good picture of the relationship between the ground plan of his airport and the moving blips which represent planes flying in the air. But he does not know, without getting further information, at what altitudes these planes are flying. It looks all the same to him whether one is at 500 feet, another at 50,000, or, and this is the hazard, whether both are at 5,000. Research is at present underway on radar equipment that will measure altitude. Proposals have been presented to ICAO, and the first experimental tower has already been built. But the use of these devices on airlines is still several years away. Now we have a man standing by who knows all about this kind of research, and he'll be our guide to the kind of work that's being done to make tomorrow's airliners safe when they're flying at tomorrow's speeds. His name is Jerome Lederer.
We know what kind of air traffic system is needed. One day, maybe not too far off, we shall have it. I am with the Flight Safety Foundation, an organization dedicated to making the airways safer. I've also been a consultant for ICAO in Montreal. How will it be different from the present system? Well, for one thing, the whole idea of using a human voice for instructions from ground to air will change. That will be all automated. Each airplane will be allocated a movable cube of airspace. Computers will probe for possible conflicts and pass solutions on to the controllers. Only near airports will this area system of automatic control have to give way to a channel type of approach to the runways. Work towards this kind of automated air traffic control system is underway right now. Various aspects of it are being researched here in the United States. Other activities on related fields are being pursued in England, in the Netherlands, and in many other countries. At some point, the stage will have been reached when this system is considered ready for regular international airline use. And at that point, ICAO will enter the picture, and the system and perhaps competing ones developed in other countries will be brought to the conference table at Montreal. There will be intensive consideration of all aspects: cost, practicability, and scope. Finally, an agreement will be reached, an agreement to which all ICAO members will be asked to subscribe. Then the world's airlines will have taken another great step towards uniformity, reliability, and safety in the world's air lane.
Well, that, of course, is all in the future, and we are concerned with today, or rather with tonight, because we have to get back to the ground. And it seems that there's quite a bit of weather about, and the pilot has asked for a GCA, a ground-controlled approach to Idlewild.
Idlewild ground control, this is Air India Jet 108. Request GCA approach.
Air India 108, this is Idlewild radar. Hear you loud and clear. How do you hear me?
Idlewild from Air India 108, hear you loud and clear.
Air India 108 in radar contact, 11 miles southwest of the airport, heading 010. Air India 108, if no transmissions received for a period of 5 seconds, on final proceed to and hold Lido 1500.
Before we complete the final landing, let's pause and look at the role that ICAO plays in it. I am John Bellringer of the ICAO Technical Secretariat. The most critical phase of flight is the final approach to land, and in this connection, the instrument landing system was adopted by ICAO as an international standard some 12 years ago, and today it serves the airlines on more than 400 runways of the world's airports. Additionally, at a number of the larger international airports, a precise radar system called Ground Controlled Approach, or GCA, is used to guide a pilot by the spoken word to a point from which he can land visually. ICAO has developed technical specifications for GCA which ensure that all installations will perform alike wherever they are located. Without the assistance of ILS and GCA, many flights would need to be diverted to other aerodromes where the weather conditions are more favorable, but this would be both expensive to the airline and inconvenient to the air passenger. Now, let's watch and see how the jet aircraft you've been following is torqued down to a safe landing.
Air India 108, turn right, heading 040. Descend to 1,500.
Roger, Air India Jet 108.
Okay, 1,500 feet, maintaining.
Air India 108 is 1,500 feet maintaining.
Air India 108, now on final. Do not acknowledge further transmissions. Air India 108, 9 miles from touchdown, 300 feet right of course. Turn right, heading 045. Air India 108, turn right, heading 047. On course, 8 miles from touchdown. Air India 108, 7 miles from touchdown, on course, heading 047. Air India 108, 6.5 miles from touchdown, on course, approaching glide path. Air India 108, 6 miles from touchdown, on course. Air India 108, 5 miles from touchdown, on glide path, on course, begin descent. Air India 108, 75 feet above glide path, adjust rate of descent. Air India 108, 3.5 miles from touchdown, on course, on glide path. 3 miles from touchdown, on course, on glide path.
Air India 108, clear to land, runway 4 right.
Air India 108, passing the outer marker, cleared to land, runway 4 right, wind north-northeast 5 knots. Air India 108, 2 miles from touchdown, on course, on glide path. 1.5 miles from touchdown, on course, on glide path. 1 mile from touchdown, on course, on glide path. Over the approach lights, on course, on glide path. Over the end of the runway, on course, on glide path. Take over visually, complete your approach.
Roger, full flaps, full flaps.
Idlewild radar out.
Just another landing, just another flight strip to be cleared from the control board, just another routine bread and butter miracle completed. Ladies and gentlemen, that was an international zone study of the United Nations role in air traffic safety, together with a modest hint that airborne people of all countries would not be as safe as they are if the United Nations had not its own international civil aviation organization. Goodbye.
Hello everybody, welcome. I'm Skip Alsheimer. Welcome to our AV Geeks lunchtime streaming show. For those of you that have been watching since mid-March, that was our 800th film. 800 films that we've watched. It's actually more than that because some of the films that I do for other screenings I haven't listed, but 800, that's great. Wow. Progress. Now we only have another 35,000 to go. Yeah. New ones added all the time. So that's an interesting, the United Nations television series. I have quite a few in that collection. All of them are hosted by Alistair Cook, and they all deal with international issues that only the UN can solve, quote unquote. But it captures like what air travel was like, commercial air travel was like at that time in history, which was probably, I think, the early 60s, early mid-60s. Anyways, fascinating film. Let's see. I think it's time to read a storybook courtesy of Weston Woods. This is what we call an iconographic film, meaning that it's just panning across illustrations, but it's short and it's. We saw one of these the other day that was over the top, so I don't know. I haven't seen any of these because they're iconographic, but let's go. Let's learn about Magic Michael.
By Louis Slobodkin. Michael wasn't happy just being my brother. He wanted to be something or other. Something big, something high that prowls in the jungle or flies in the sky. When he got to be almost 4, roar. Then he'd spill his milk and lap it up, or chew the rug and become a pup. He'd become a cow and say moo, moo. Then he'd eat raspberry jam, as quiet as a mouse. But did you ever try to read with a tiger in the house? Once I took him to school. We were going to have cake. He stopped at the door and hissed, "I'm a snake." And as a girl said a poem about a bird in a tree, Michael started thinking, what could he be? He jumped up on a desk and screamed, "Orc, orc!" So I said, "Excuse us, Michael's a stork." Then he let out a yell you could hear for a mile. For now he'd become a crocodile. When he flopped and he cooed at my teacher, Miss Widgeon, sent us home, 'cause he was a pigeon. But Mike didn't care. He grabbed a cake or two and hopped all the way home like a kangaroo. If he curled up and munched a mitten, you knew he had become a kitten. But even as you watched, he'd give you a look and gently fold up and be a book. Or climb up in a corner with that look in his eye. He was a little round splat, a mat, or a fat little pig, a goat, a boat, or he'd dance a jig and be a bear, a chair, or a Belgian hare. And he hopped so fast it was a shock when he stood still and was a rock. Or he'd ting-a-ling and boom tick-tock and stand in the corner like a grandfather's clock. He'd make you laugh. He was very funny when he wiggled his ears and became a bunny. And we didn't even mind when he'd splash on us. Of course, we all knew he was an octopus. But when he'd be an elephant for a couple of days and eat up my flowers and break the vase, I'd be terribly angry. But he'd just wiggle and squirm and not say a word. He'd become a worm. He nibbled on leaves and people would laugh until I explained he was a giraffe. Our house was a jungle, every closet a den. We even got used to that, but then he stopped being something that growls or sings and decided from now on to be just things. Not trains that chew, nor planes that roar, or things you could see in a department store. Michael picked hard things that you never could tell, like the time he was a deep, dark well. Or he shouted, "Shock, shock," and ran back and forth, hollering, "I'm electricity! Turn me on! Turn me off!" When he walked on his head and wouldn't stop, we guessed after a while he must be a mop. We worried for days, and it seemed like a year. Michael was everything you could see or hear. Of course, we loved animals, birds and things, lions and pelicans with golden wings. But this climbing and crawling wore his trousers out, and we had his future to think about. Should we send him to school? Should we send him to sea? If he grows up like this, what would he be? He's too young for school. And if we sent him to sail, he'd fail. One day, Pop came home with a great big box. I hope Michael's a boy, but I suppose he's a fox. It's really too bad, and really quite sad, but a bike can't be ridden by a toad or a shad. "Nay," said a voice from under the table, where Michael, it seems, was a horse in a stable. Then out he crawled with a glint in his eye. Shall I be something, or shall I be I? But when he saw the bike on the floor, he stood on his 2 feet instead of all 4. "Guess what I am? A boy!" cried Michael. And off he rode on his new bicycle. Folks see us come up the street, wondering whether he'll moo or whether he'll bleat. I say, it's all right. Mike's a boy. Now he's really my brother. He's through being a cow, or some or other.
So misbehave until you get a bike. Sure, that works. That's what little brothers do. It is glorious outside. End of September, beginning of October, it's my favorite time of year, mostly because of my birthday coming up. But really it's because it's just, it you know, it's crisp, and it's Halloween coming up, and I don't know. It's just, October is my favorite, absolute favorite. I guess when I was a kid, that's when the Sears catalog came out with all the toys, the Wish book, just, and all the ads for toys would come on, and all this. It's just a great time. But it's also fair time, and unfortunately, we can't have the state fair this year because people aren't practicing social distancing, etc. So we don't deserve a fair. We do have the thing where you can drive through and supposedly get all your fried favorite things. I was interested to potentially try the corn dog pickle, where basically somebody shoves a pickle inside a hot dog inside of a pickle. They batter it and then fry it. I'm not one that always goes for things like that, but that seemed particularly compelling. But because of that, here's a film that captures the busy day at the county fair.
Have you ever been to a county fair? Every summer, many people come to fairs like this one. This is the story of one family and their busy day at the county fair. Jerry and Linda and their parents have been to the fair before, but this year is special. This year, Linda and Jerry have entered something in one of the because he has promised his family a surprise at the fair. Father says there's plenty of time before his surprise, so he suggests that they all look at some of the exhibits first. The first exhibit they saw was a display of vegetables. At a fair, the best things in each exhibit win prizes. This man's pumpkin has won a prize. One of these fine squashes has won a first prize. The family looked at the flower exhibit next. Here were beautiful flowers of many different kinds. Near the flowers was an exhibit of handicrafts, small articles made by hand. In some wire cases, there were other handicrafts that were interesting, especially to Linda. They were handmade aprons. Linda thought that next year she might make an apron to bring to the fair. And now the children were very eager to see an exhibit in another building. Can you guess what they wanted to see? Jerry ran ahead into the building where the poultry exhibit was. And this is what the children were interested in. It was their pet duck that they had entered in the fair. Jerry wanted to make sure their duck had enough to eat. It was a very tame duck, and its name was Snowflake. Later, the judge, a man who knew a lot about ducks, would pick the best ones. But there was still plenty of time before the judging of the poultry would start, so they went to see some of the other animals. Father was eager to look at the livestock. There were some fine sheep at the fair. Their owners were getting them ready for the judge to look at. The judge looked over several sheep and then pointed to one. It was a fine-looking ram. The owner of the ram was Mr. Allen. Father and the family congratulated Mr. Allen on his prize-winning animal. Then Jerry and Linda asked to see some of the other livestock. There was another prize winner, a big hog. It was a fine male hog, a boar, and it had already won 3 prizes. Linda thought she liked the dairy cattle best of all the animals because they always seemed so gentle. They looked at some young cows, not quite fully grown. These are called heifers. Not far away were some steers. Steers are beef cattle. Linda and Jerry watched the judges. Everyone was very quiet as the judges looked at the steers. They were heavy, well-fed animals. Jerry thought one of the steers owned by a boy would win. Linda picked one of the steers owned by a girl to win. The judges carefully compared the steers to see which one was better. Then one judge handed a ribbon for first prize to a girl. Her steer had won. Jerry told Linda she was a better cattle judge than he was. And now it was time to see the judging they were most interested in, the poultry contest. The judge was having a hard time deciding among the ducks. Finally, he gave out the ribbons. Snowflake didn't win a prize, but Father said the children did well for their first try, and maybe Jerry and Linda would win a prize next year. After the contest, Jerry and Linda wanted to see more of the fair, but Father said he had to finish preparing his surprise, so they would all meet later at the grandstand. Father suggested that while he was getting ready for the surprise, Jerry, Linda, and Mother could go over to the Midway. The Midway was the part of the fair where all the rides were. There were so many things on the Midway, Jerry and Linda didn't know what they wanted to do first. There was a shooting gallery, a place to test your strength, and of course, many wonderful rides. First, Jerry and Linda went on a ride called the Mixer. Then they rode on the roller coaster. They had time for one more ride, so they tried the octopus. Now they would have to hurry. It was time for Father's surprise. Father had told the family to go to the grandstand. A lot of people were already there. Jerry and Linda and Mother found some seats. Then Linda saw Father. He was sitting on his tractor. So that was Father's surprise. He had entered his tractor in the pulling contest. Mother explained the tractor pulling contest to Linda and Jerry. A heavy load was hooked to each tractor. The tractor had to pull a steel sled with a load of concrete blocks. The tractor that could pull the heaviest load would be the winner. As the tractor went down the track, men would step on the load to make it heavier. Each man added more and more weight. Little by little, the tractor slowed down. Finally, the wheels began to spin. The tractor stopped. Now another tractor would try. Once again, the load was pulled. The family watched as more and more men got on the load. And finally, the second tractor stopped. And now it was Father's turn. There he was, getting ready. His motor sounded good, and he hoped his wheels were weighted properly. Slowly, his tractor pulled the sled. Now, once again, the men got on to make the load heavier. It was easy at first, but what would happen when all the men got on? Keep going, Dad. Come on. Keep going. He was still going. Now he was halfway down the course. The tractor was still going. Still going. Now he was almost at the end of the course. Now almost every man was on. Still going. He made it. Father had won the tractor pulling contest. The judge gave a trophy. What would the family think of that? Jerry said it was a wonderful surprise. Father said he surprised himself, too, when he won first place. But now they'd have some fun. First, they'd have something to eat at the hot dog stand. And then there was the Ferris wheel. It was the ride that Jerry and Linda had saved for the last. Jerry couldn't wait. At first, Linda thought she might be scared, but after she was in the seat, she found that it was fun. Around they went. As they came to the top, Jerry and Linda had a view of the whole fair. They thought of all the exhibits they had seen and all the things they had done. When it was over, they were ready to go home. It was a wonderful way to end a busy day at the county fair.
So, I live in Raleigh, so we don't have a county fair. We actually have the state fair here. And twice I have gone all day. First time I did it on my own, and it was literally, I think it was like 9 a.m. to midnight. That was my goal. And it was about 10 o'clock where I had just had a giant turkey leg, and I was by myself, and I started having this crazy sugar crash, like salt, nitrate, I don't know what was going on, and the fireworks were going off, and I had kind of a freak out, and I had to leave because I was afraid that if I didn't get out then, I wouldn't be able to get out. I don't know what was going on, but the second time I did it, it was a challenge I did with a friend of mine who was an illustrator, this guy, Paul Friedrich, and we did from 7 a.m. So before the fair actually opened, we went to some horsemanship judging competitions, and we stayed until well after midnight. And what happens is the fair shuts down at 11, although it's still open, but there's nothing going on. And I still had that kind of weird panic attack kind of partway through because of just the sea of people coming through. It's just, and then the poor food choices and all this stuff. And but he was there, and we had a little entourage that kind of joined us at different points during the day, and we did it. We did the entire fair, and it was very obvious at the end of it that I was like, you know what? If I really wanted to spend the night here, I could do it. There's really, you just go under a ride or a booth, you just set up a sleeping bag and just hang out, if that's what you really wanted to do. Of course, I'm sure at some point when the people go away, the rats come out. And so that's not what you really want to do. But I love and I hate the state fair. There are certain places that I love to go at the state fair. One is one year I got my handwriting analyzed by every single computer that had handwriting analysis. I think it was 3 or 4. I found out that they were all owned by the same guy. And what's great about it is they look like computers circa 1960s, or 50s. So there's like all these flashing lights, and you fill out your signature on this little punch card, and they plug it into something, and I don't think it does anything except just randomly spit crap out. But I spent like $10 getting my handwriting analyzed. There used to be a guy that he had a booth, and he represented this company that makes ball jars for packaging and for canning. And it was just this black guy just hanging out. And he was there like 3 or 4 years in a row. So I'd always go by and visit him and say hi. And, he'd have a little jar of candy that you could get a mint So things like that have always been really why I like the fair, these weird little incidental things. And then, of course, all of the kid art is really phenomenal. But I'll talk more about that. I have some more fair films that I'll be busting out as we go along. This next film is actually on film. In case you didn't know, I actually have a telecine here that actually transfers film live, and so I kind of alternate back and forth between a file that I've already captured and something else. Oh, also, yeah, somebody pointed out that so that last film is actually going to be riffed by Mystery Science Theater people for a fundraiser that they're doing coming up, and they reached out to me, so I'm kind of working with Mystery Science Theater people, which is really great. They're very nice people. Really fun, and of course, you could say that what they did early on was something that contributed a little bit to why I started collecting films, because it kind of reminded me of those things existed. I've never aspired to riff on films like them. It's just it requires a different type of brain that I don't totally have. But there you go. I won't riff on a film while we're watching it, but after, I will definitely sit and talk about it, make jokes about it. Anyways, so this next film is, the title is clipped, but it's called Pigtails, and I'll talk a little bit more about the filmmaker as we watch it, after we watch it. Pigtails.
These are self-feeders. They keep an even supply of feed in the troughs all the time. Feed is left around Mr. Pig because he has a small stomach and eats only a little at a time. He once curls his tail one way, he always curls. These modern barns keep the pigs warm and dry in bad weather and protect them from the sun in hot weather. There are individual pens for each mother and her babies. This is the story of a pig called Curly because he has such a tightly curled tail. Curly has 9 brothers and sisters, and they're always hungry. Their mother, Lady Pathfinder, feeds them about every hour. They are quiet when they are nursing. Curly and his sister Pinky are great pals and are always getting into mischief. This is how Pinky looked when she was a day old. Curly likes to snuggle his brothers and sisters. Little pigs sleep a lot, and so does their mother. And there go naughty children to run away. But first, why not have a drink at the grown-ups' fountain? And here comes Pinky. Say, this is a fine place for scratching. Ah, that feels good. Curly has been in the pasture before, but always with his mother. He joins some pigs that are rooting. Roots are good natural feed for pigs. In fact, wild pigs live mostly on roots. Pigs are curious, and Curly has always wondered about the spotted pigs that live next door. He peeks through the fence. Say, what funny pigs not to be afraid of those giant horses. Can that black horse that is nursing be a baby? Well, Curly and Pinky think she's a very big baby. But look out! They're coming our way. Curly's scared. His little heart is pounding. What should he do? Hey, better run for home. Why did he ever run away? And now everything is all right again. It's time for the men to let Lady and her babies out to pasture. And is Curly glad to be near his mother? Pigs are naturally clean, and if water is provided, will bathe several times a day. It makes their skins feel clean and cool. Sometimes farmers put oil and sulfur in the pig's wallow box to kill the bugs and improve their hair. Just like a woman's beauty mud pack. Papa Pete also likes to root and take the baths. The mud and water not only clean the skin, but also get rid of the bugs. The papa pig, or boar, has a thick skin and stiff hair. Hog hair or bristles are used to make brushes. Many products besides meat and lard come from pigs, such as leather, bristles, hair, fertilizer, and medical supplies. The sides of his mouth stick out because of his big teeth, or tusks. Papa Pete is inquisitive and likes to watch Mama and the babies. These babies nurse until they are about 2 months old, but from the time they are 3 weeks old, grain is added to their diet. Ah, there's a real fight on, so it's probably Curly. And so Curly grows up. He has his identification number notched on his ear, but Curly still likes to play with the little pigs. Pigs will be pigs. Say, what's up? The men herd the pigs into a pen when they are old enough to have rings in their noses. Rings are put in their noses to keep them from rooting up and destroying the green grass, which is good food for them. Ah, look at Curly go! And is Blackjack fast? Curly would be hard to catch. And so it goes until all the pigs of the right age are in the pen. The pigs are not badly frightened because they have always been well treated. Good farmers are gentle but firm with their stock. It hurts, but only for a minute. Now it's Blackjack's turn. It is hard work to ring a large number of pigs. We know this is Curly by the way he fights. When a truckload is finished, the men drive them back to their pasture. Spot superintends the job. He is trained to herd the pigs, and also he will bark if anything goes wrong. There's a right and a wrong way to lift pigs. Every pig is a different little character. Good little Pinky. Bad little Curly. Curly looks cross, but he will soon forget. He joins his pals. These wire fences are electrified, and the pigs learn early not to touch their noses to the hot wires and get a shock. Wire fences are clean and inexpensive. The pigs are older, but they're still interested in the pig farm next door that raises pigs for market. There, the men are cooking a dinner for the pigs. It smells very good to Curly. Good cull potatoes and beans. This farmer, Mr. Reed, does truck gardening and raises pigs as a sideline. He grows most of their food and fattens them with fresh vegetables and plenty of grain to make their flesh firm. Sometimes table leftovers are fed to hogs. Mr. Reed grows his own grain and alfalfa. Pigs need a well-balanced diet with minerals and vitamins. Just like tree, farmers feed their stock according to raise or buy. But what is happening now at that farm next door? Curly watches the farmers vaccinate the pigs. Pigs are vaccinated when young to keep them from catching colic, a dreaded hog disease which might kill many of them. Each pig receives 2 shots. They only hurt for a minute and protect Mr. Pig for his whole life. But Curly is tired of watching and would like to be alone. Oh, not a chance. First Pinky, and then the whole crowd, just like in... And so they grow to be beautiful dogs. Look at their broad backs, deep side. Characteristics of good Duroc happening. Blackie doesn't like it. The men are taking Curly and his pal away. They will enter them in the hog show to be held at the stockyard. Mr. Clark has raised many champion hogs. The stock where farmers ship their hogs to be sold. The selling is done by commission men. These pigs are from Reed's farm, 200 pounds. Pigs grow fast, and when they are 6 months old, they are ready for the market. America than any other meat. At the other side of the yards, their animals ready for the judging. They wash and brush them until their coats shine. And look at Curly, having his hair rubbed with oil. He looks mad all right, but his owner seems satisfied. Curly has the fine long top line, the deep sides and full hams the Duroc is famous for. This is an important moment for the farmer. Will careful farming bring Mr. Clark another blue ribbon winner? Good old Curly, he wins.
Sorry, we got a little county fair slant to the last two films. So that was Pigtails, and that was made by Frith Films. And Frith Films was started by Emily Rachel Benton Frith. And so this is one of the few female educational filmmakers. There were ones that actually shot stuff for other companies like Encyclopedia Britannica and Coronet and also Centron, but she started her own company. So here's a little bit that's from her. She passed away in '86, but here's something about what she, about her life. An outdoor sports enthusiast, she received a degree at Wells College and trained in social work at Hull House in Chicago. She did social work in tenement districts there and later in Peoria. On her extensive travels in Europe and East Asia, she met Major Frederick Firth. No, that's not right. Frith. Yeah. They were married in Penang, China. Fred Frith preceded her in death several years earlier. She got a master's degree in child psychology from Northwestern University. Wow, there's a lot of errors in this. She moved to Hollywood, California to study filmmaking. She received a degree in cinema photography from University of Southern California. Oh, that's interesting. I wonder, I know the archivist there. I wonder if they have some of her archives. Emily established an educational film company, Frith Films. She was the producer or manager and sometimes camera operator for the productions until she was 73 years old. She produced over 60 films of elementary school to college level. She filmed a number of pictures in other countries depicting family life there. She frequently used family, nieces, and nephews as workers, as actors in her works, which makes them fun for her relations to view. She also did a number of films related to harbors of the United States. She produced The Lumberman, which shows logging crews at work in Hood River County. She retired and moved to Carmel, California, near her brother C.K. Benton, and they moved to the nursing home in Oregon, where she died in 1986. Anyways, she's one of these, this is what's interesting about educational films, is that if someone wanted to make educational films, all they had to do is just start shooting them and then take out an ad in educational screen and sell them. And so what she did is she used home movie equipment, like a home movie camera. None of her films really have sync sound where the person's talking, you can hear them talk. It's all overdubbed. And I don't know if you noticed, like a lot of the footage seemed like it was sped up. And that's because she was shooting at 18 frames a second, which is about what home movies are shot at. And then it had to be printed to 24 frames a second because that's what a sound film runs at. So they didn't really adjust and double print and optically print it in a way so that it would run at the right speed. They just left it sped up. And there's lots of filmmakers that have done this. There's another one, Sid Labyrinth, who did this amazing film called Multiple Pseudosis. But he also was an amateur photographer, and he did a couple of films about butterflies and sold them on the educational film market, or would sell them to educational film companies, the footage, and then they would turn it into a educational film. So I think that she's definitely one. Emily was one of the most prolific of them, and also what she talked about in her films were really kind of fascinating. And so that's Frith Films, and I have more of those, and at some point I'll bust some more of those out. That one was very splicey, but still pretty great. All right, let's learn about the dangers of hydrogen sulfide. This film is made for workers who deal with the harmful chemical and how to avoid breathing it.
Danger H2S is a familiar sign posted in petroleum refineries and chemical plants throughout the country. It is a warning to all that hydrogen sulfide, a killer gas, is apt to be present and that people unskilled in dealing with it should stay away. This is the story of that invisible killer and of the vicious threat it poses to human life. But it is also the story of how men in medicine and industry have learned to harness its lethal power and safeguard the lives of thousands of workers through education, rescue techniques, and protective equipment. Although the action takes place in one refinery and petrochemical plant, the information applies to any industrial plant where H2S is used as a chemical agent or where it is produced as a manufacturing byproduct. In a refinery, much of the lethal hydrogen sulfide arrives in tanker shipments of sour crude oil or naphtha. The term sour is applied to those materials which contain high percentages of volatile sulfur compounds, including H2S. Tanker crewmen and men handling cargo hoses must be ever alert to avoid breathing H2S when working with such shipments. From tankers, the sour crude or naphtha is pumped through miles of pipelines to storage tanks, where the H2S will again lie in wait for a careless human act. Minutes after a filling operation starts, the atmosphere in a tank can contain enough H2S to kill a man in seconds, and without warning. Measuring the contents of such tanks, these gauges know that only wise men are live men, so they take the proper precautions, one of which quite often is to have a buddy standing by with his fresh air mask at the ready. Well-meaning but ill-prepared rescuers often become victims themselves. On a processing unit where the prime purpose of the operation is to remove H2S from the feedstock, dangerous amounts of H2S may leak from a faulty packing gland on a pump and set the trap for the unwary or careless worker. Or venting a pump may set the trap. Or inspecting a sewer. Or opening a pipeline. In many cases, the manufacturing process itself generates large quantities of H2S. Depending on the pressures within the system, the condition of the detection and alarm system and other equipment, the normally safe area could at any time become a gas chamber for an innocent victim. This operator uses a detector to determine the exact source of the H2S leak. As H2S passes through the glass tube containing grains of a chemical, the grains turn from gray to black. But what about the question, how and when is H2S fatal to the human system? In a concentration of as little as 1/10 of 1 part of H2S in a million parts of air, a slight odor of rotten eggs can be detected by most people. For others with a less acute sense of smell, odor detection would start at slightly higher concentrations. The odor becomes stronger as the concentration is increased, but then, due to a dangerous characteristic of H2S, the sense of smell is soon fatigued or deadened. And at a concentration of about 100 parts per million, after a short period of exposure, the average person might assume that the H2S had dissipated because he could no longer smell it. This should be a warning sign. At about 700 parts per million, or 7/100ths of 1% of H2S in air, breathing stops and unconsciousness occurs between 5 and 60 seconds after exposure. This varies from individual to individual, depending on his state of health. For example, if this 5-ounce glass were filled with H2S and dropped into a 55-gallon drum containing clean air, the resulting mixture could knock a man out in less time than it takes to give this demonstration. Much of the information we have on H2S and its effect on the human system we owe to men like Dr. H.W. Gerard, shown here addressing a group of refinery workers. Dr. Gerard, a prominent toxicologist, has done extensive work in controlled experiments to study the effects of H2S on white rats. A safer life for countless industrial workers has resulted from such studies. In his demonstration before this group of process men, Dr. Gerard will show how a living being reacts to H2S poisoning and how artificial respiration, applied in time, can quickly restore the victim to normal. He places a healthy specimen in a jar under room conditions. He seals the jar. Next, he starts a chemical reaction to generate H2S in the jar.
Yeah, we're not going to watch
He
that.
starts a chemical reaction to
I'm
generate-
sorry. I forgot about the rats. I apologize. Yeah. There's some white rat footage that shows up in various films that I have, and they don't fare well, so my apologies. Let's watch a bunch of Extension Homemakers tour the World Trade Center. Here we go.
week of November 10 through 16, 1974, was an exciting week in international relations. It was a week of diplomacy and détente. It was also a week of demonstrations and destruction. And that particular week, 92 Tar Heel women, all leaders in the state's extension homemakers clubs, were on a study tour to Washington, D.C. and New York City for a close-up look at international relationships, international trade, and history in the making.
This is Jan Christensen, Home Economics Editor at North Carolina State University, inviting you on the most exciting United Nations study tour in 18 years.
First, let's make a stop on Embassy Row in Washington. Why are embassies important? What purpose do they serve? Dr. Otto Baumel, Agricultural Council of Germany, explains.
We have in this embassy in Washington, as any other embassy, mainly two functions. Number one, as part of our government, we are a watchdog for this government, observing America in its politics, in its economic developments, and we are reporting back to our government what we see and hear here. Because to know about America is very important for the decision-making in my country and for my government. So the number one task is observing and reporting. Now, the number two task is to represent our country here in a foreign country. We provide material for everybody who wants to know has some questions and want to know something about Germany. We have a lot of printed material on economic questions, on political questions, and we try to give as much information as we can.
Later in the day, the Tar Heel women visited 4 other embassies: South Africa, the Philippines, Australia, and Japan. At each embassy, they had an hour briefing on that country's role in world trade and its trade relationship with the United States. The women who visited the Embassy of Australia heard Michael Rossell, Second Secretary of the Embassy, make these comments about changing over to the metric system.
We have found one main thing in particular when you come to learn it, and all of you are going to be involved in this exercise, that there comes a stage where you must completely drop the old system. You must forget pounds and all these things, and just think purely of the new system. Think metric is the slogan they use. And that's a very important point, because other countries didn't do it that way. The newspapers, for example, kept on running degrees Fahrenheit and Celsius degrees side by side, and our eyes just picked up the old forms, and that's no way to learn it. But it works, and of course, beyond doubt, particularly as North America or the United States is the only major country of any significance not yet metric, it'll mean an awful lot to not only the kids and the adults who have to learn it, but in terms of foreign trade and all the sort of things where the immense simplification of the system will be worth all the temporary pain.
The following day, we were to visit the Pan American Union, headquarters of the Organization of American States. But 2 days before our visit, a bomb exploded, doing $75,000 worth of damage. Although the FBI wasn't allowing anyone into the building, we did have a chance to meet with 2 representatives of the Organization of American States, Rafael Sarda from Uruguay, Chief of the Visitors and Speakers Bureau, and Mrs. Elba de Cabo, an economist from Argentina. Mrs. de Cabo brought us some down-home information, comparing the economies of some Latin and South American countries to North Carolina.
North Carolina is primarily a state where the industrial production constitutes 80% of the gross product, and the agricultural production only 20%. Its industrial production covers mainly textiles and apparel, metals and machinery, chemicals and rubber. Its agricultural production covers cash crops and livestock. Latin American industrial production represents only 20% of the gross domestic product. What do these figures show? That North Carolina is a healthy state with a large and well-diversified base of industrial and agricultural production. Some of its agriculture is export-oriented, like tobacco, corn, and soybeans, which comprises the main cash crops, while the livestock production is rather domestically oriented, as it is in general the agricultural production and export pattern of the United States as a whole, where 85% of the agricultural products are consumed at home.
The Homemakers were also guests of the United States Department of Agriculture, where they were met by Assistant Secretary of Agriculture Dr. Clayton Yeiter, Administrator of the Extension Service Edwin Kirby, and other dignitaries. Later that afternoon, the busloads of homemakers left for New York City and two other important stops, the United Nations and the World Trade Center. We chose a historic day to visit the United Nations, Wednesday, November 13th, the day that Yasser Arafat, leader of the Palestine Liberation Organization, addressed the General Assembly. Although there were bomb and assassination threats, and security was tighter than it had ever been at United Nations headquarters, we were allowed into the building, the only group let in that day. While Arafat spoke to the General Assembly, we were in another part of the building listening to Mrs. Helvi Sipila of Finland, Secretary General of International Women's Year. Here are some of her thoughts on women and politics.
We have not created the world as it is today. I think we who have produced life would not be willing to see our children to be killed in the wars in the future. And it's rather amazing for us who are newcomers in the political field that we still seem to consider ourselves as second-class citizens who hardly have right to go and say what we want. And what I think the International Women's Year especially should bring about is a change of our own attitudes, to realize that we can do a lot if we are more active and if we consider ourselves equally authorized and equally responsible as men for the whole future of the world.
At the same time, another important international event, the World Food Conference, was going on in Rome. And in Washington and New York, people from the United Nations and elsewhere were following the press reports closely. Maurice Green of Australia, a member of the UN's Food and Agricultural Organization, saw some political overtones in the World Food Conference.
This is a political conference on food. This is not a conference on consumption or production. We're not going to talk about the technical things. FAO has been talking about these technical things for a long time. We believe that we know more than any other organization about that side. And we're prepared and we stand ready at this conference with all the inputs.
Later in the day, security was a little less strict, and we were allowed to tour the UN building, including the meeting rooms for the Trusteeship Council, Security Council, Economic and Social Council, and the General Assembly. During our 7-hour visit, we didn't cross paths with Arafat, but each of us is a bit more interested in the Middle East and its politics after making our way through police cordons and security checks. On Thursday, the final stop in New York City was the 110-story World Trade Center, where we heard about the center's functions and authority from Sidney Schachter, Deputy Director of the World Trade Institute. Although world trade does seem complicated to most of us, Schachter pointed out that it does have its lighter side.
We got a list of 17 items that these people were interested in buying. And we looked at the list, and we said, there's something wrong. This is what they're interested in selling. And they said, no, they said they're interested in buying. So we were somewhat confused, and we phoned around, and we got some people who are interested in selling the list of products involved, but we were somewhat disturbed by the anomaly. Here's people coming from Taiwan looking for American manufacturers of toasters, of small hand appliances, small radios, exactly what they make, mostly for us. Well, it turned out that the people who arrived were the buyers from the 10 largest department stores in Taiwan who were looking for products whose label said Made in USA to be sold as a prestige item in Taiwan.
Later we took a tour up to the 110th floor, and as one woman put it, whether you're on the outside looking up or the inside looking down, the World Trade Center is quite a building. There's a postscript to all this. It turns out that the Arafat visit to the United Nations and the bombing of the Pan American Union were just part of the excitement generated in mid-November. Just prior to our visit to their embassy, the South African delegation was unseated at the United Nations. And just 1 week after our stop at the embassy for the Philippines, their chief counsel was held hostage at gunpoint in the very building we visited. The North Carolina Agricultural Extension Service believes that an understanding of world trade and international relations is an important part of today's homemakers' education. The study tour to Washington and New York was one way to create that awareness. And the fact that the tour took place while history was in the making was an added bonus. One that made the United Nations study tour one that we'll talk about and remember for a long time.
That was fascinating for a couple of reasons. One of them, it's based in North Carolina. All the Homemaker extension women, which is part of the ag extension part of North Carolina and at North Carolina State. So these are the women that would do presentations at local women's groups and would help with advice on how to cook and can and use the products that are made by the agricultural entities in North Carolina, and they still kind of exist in a weird way. And the state fair is very much related to that. So there's still competitions about canning. There's still competitions about cakes and eggs. There's a whole egg decorating competition. All that stuff, I love it, man. It's so awesome. Anyways, but the fact that a bunch of these women, middle-aged women, went to D.C. and then went to New York while all this kind of tumultuous stuff was happening, and they're kind of framing their trip. The Australian talking about how we have to switch over to the metric system is also really great, and it's something that we've been talking about on here. And yeah, it's really quite something. And I think that the deal is that this group probably raised money or got grants to do this trip. And so this was their way to capture and to present what they did and talk about the importance of what their mission is, and what they could also take it around the state and show it. So it's a wonderful time capsule. It's like a home movie, but it's even more than that. But and the font they use is really great, and the hairstyles are so good. Oh boy. Thank you so much for joining us today. In the comments on YouTube and Facebook, I put a link to all the films that we have watched, and it's at this point the count is 805 films. So you can look and see what we showed over the years. And I want to do a special thank you to Thomas. Thomas has been rewarding us every time we reach a benchmark like this. And so he gave a very, very gracious gift that we will use to not only purchase coffee, which you can give us coffee from here, but also to probably buy some supplies. We need some white tape. This white tape is what we use to tape things down and do quick splices and things like that. And it will also go towards some storage costs, because we are paying for now 2 storage units, which will probably be close to $500 a month. So thank you so much for that kind gift. And thank you everybody for watching these films and letting me blather on about some things. I hope they're interesting. I don't know. But letting me kind of pick and choose the films. And I'm trying to not show films that are too outrageous. But if you missed the beginning, I found yet another really interesting countdown. And I will actually go out on that. Actually, I'll just duplicate it and do this. What am I saying? Join me tomorrow, 1 o'clock, and we'll watch some more films. But this is an interesting countdown made by a company, Films Incorporated. Films Incorporated made films, but they also were a big distribution company based in St. Louis, I think. And so I was transferring one of their films, and I found this really amazing countdown. And so here it is, looped. And it actually has sound, too. So here is the countdown for Films Incorporated. And we will see you again tomorrow, everybody. Thank you so much. Take care. As always, please rewind and love each other. All right. Thank you again.